thank you for having me. I know you possibly, I tried to not bore you, so I'm not going to read the paper. I'm not going to go through much historical detail. At the end, I will address you a couple of my publications. If you want to go for looking at very detailed discussion, you can just obviously follow it, including that book that I have a chapter on it, just published, I think, last week. So I will explain about that one at the end. I guess you're familiar with Muharram ritual, but possibly not with Muharram in Mumbai or in India in general. And so, as you may know, Bombay is basically it's a Portuguese name, means a good bay, because it was a kind of Portuguese port. But during 90s, after the rising of Hindu nationalism, they changed it to Mumbai. Although possibly people, they may assume it's very sensitive to use Bombay or Mumbai. It's not. If you go to Mumbai, it's not like that. And funnily enough, often people, they use Bombay to address the old city and Mumbai as a metropolitan. So it's a kind of, and in my academic writing, often if I wanted to address the history of city, often I use Bombay, and the modern time I use Mumbai. And so it's basically the same. And because I assume you know about Muharram ritual, I'm not going to go through it, obviously. It's going to be wasting of time. But I would only mention that, as you know, Muharram rituals, there are large number of different rituals that have been developed through history, mostly originated in Iraq, in Egypt, Syria, and highly developed in Iran, and I would call it diffuse in India. Because although in Middle East and in, like, let's say, Shia vote, is often Muharram is about dividing Sunni and Shia, but it's not the case in Mumbai and in India in general. And obviously Safavid dynasty has a major influence to disperse Shiism to India, but Shiism has a much longer history in India because we have Deccan dynasty in India, in south of India, which is much older than Safavid. So we have a long history of the Shiism in India. But as I said, as Muharram ritual, like any other cultural phenomena, when moved to a new context, is totally changed. And that's the case. So like in India, Muharram wasn't about Shia community. And the Sunnis been involved, even Hindus, and obviously the ritual was totally influenced by Hindu culture. And, you know, during last possibly 5-6 years, I'll always use this cover and always fascinated with this one. Because I would say is captured the whole nature and the essence of the Muharram in Mumbai in 19th century. You can see is not grief. There is a joy in that picture. It's very emotional, really active. And one of the things that I would mention is this, let's call it object or item called tazia. And always I use that term to explain how a phenomenon or ritual would be changed in different contexts. The term of tazia itself is a really interesting term to see how it's changed in different contexts. Tazia in Arabic context in Iraq it means service session for Muharram. So it's more basically grief ritual. But in Iran means passion play. So it's a kind of theater that commemorate Muharram and the tragedy of Ashura. But in India, this item called tazia, and is item that they carried through the procession and then immersed it in the sea from. So it's a totally Hindu idea because the Muharram procession, the final procession, is basically symbolic funeral. So you can see how the symbolic funeral become localized in Indian context. But the other thing is, the Muharram ritual wasn't Shia ritual in Mumbai particularly. It was actually dominated by Sunnis, especially Hanafis and the community called Konkanis. I will go through that kind of detail a bit later. One of the key points in my research was to look at Muharram ritual or any ritual as a part of urbanization process. Because Mumbai was a kind of village in early 19th century and became a 1 million metropolitan city in late 19th century. Although, it was a huge magnet for people from all over India, Indian Ocean, from Iran, so people are pouring in the city. But urbanization is not about immigration of people. It's about, and that's the way that I actually articulate it, urbanization is a process of negotiation of different communities in city. So when a large number of people arriving in a city, how they are actually positioning themselves within the whole urban society. And this negotiation is very critical for history of any city. And often rituals play a significant role for negotiation. And to make a point why Muharram was important for Mumbai, because simply Muharram was the biggest festival in the city. And so it was a great social practice, I will call it, to negotiate among people who are arriving in India, in Mumbai. And again, I articulate the Bombay community or Bombay population or society as a fractal system. But what I mean by fractal is obviously I borrow it from the geography. So if you look at something that has any phenomenal form that has a fractal geometry, if you look at it from far, you assume it's one shape. But if you're getting close, you see each part of it has own structure. And that was the case for society in Mumbai. So if you look at the text from colonial authorities, they talk about Muslims community. They talk about Shia community. There is no such a thing in Bombay, even today. Because there's so many different Shias, let alone Muslims, arriving in Mumbai, encountering other Shia that was totally new for them. So like, imagine, I'll use, for example, the case of Iranian. Iranian arrive in Bombay, mostly from Shiraz in early 19th century. They assume they are Shia. But they're faced with lots of other Shia who've been different, but they also say we are Shia. So what's happening in this situation? You have to define your own identity again against the new people that you're encountering with. And as a Shia, what are you going to do? You're going to use Muharram. But in that situation, you have to invent the Muharram again to distinguish it from the other Muharram. So like everybody has own Muharram ritual. So because everybody used Muharram, so Muharram became very complex and constantly changed and reinvented in Bombay because of the city was a kind of huge magnet. People are arriving and they keep trying to invest and define their own identity. Even within Iranians, which are mentioned in this book, Iranians arrive from different parts of Iran and encountering with other Iranians. They say, well, they are different again. So it was very kind of, I would say, melting pot of people arriving there. And for me as an urbanist, the ritual became a key point to understand the whole dynamic of city. And why is it important for me? Because that's why I call it urban ritual. For those who are familiar with urban studies, during second half of 20th century, Marxist theorists, or basically left movement, they had a huge contribution to urban studies. Possibly the most important, I would say. So if you remove Marxist scholarships from urban studies, we left nothing, almost. But the problem here is, because of the agenda, they mainly focus on class struggle. They mainly focus on everyday life. But during ritual, and the ritual are not running based on class, it's all about community. So the whole interaction and communication and negotiation is totally changed. So like it's what we call it in ritual studies, liminal situation. So we're gonna experience a new way of bonding community together, which is totally different from everyday life. And it's impact hugely on the way that the cities basically negotiate. Let me put it in this way. I've been in India for 2 years only, and for few field work and 2 years for Muharram. Whenever I talk to my friends who basically from Mumbai, they're shocked how much I know about the city. And they couldn't believe it. And my answer was, I'm not a genius, obviously, but the reason that I know that much, because I've been involved with ritual. I'm not talking about Muharram, ritual in general. Because rituals is intensive in social interaction. So if you understand what's happening during ritual, you learn a lot that you can't understand through the year. So that's very critical for understanding the city. And that was my main contribution to, I would say, urban studies, to see how ritual, or particularly religious ritual, are a part of urbanization process. So that's why I actually became interested in ritual. Oh, I'm confused with that. Let me start with because I have to give you a kind of a broad idea of what was happening in India, and then in Mumbai, and then try to see how it was changed because of this cosmopolitan process that I call it. First of all, I would say there was 4 major segments, I would call it, in Muharram during 19th century. The one was called Tuli procession, which was basically running a procession or parade with every mohalla, as they call it in India, which is basically residential neighborhood, the locality, which is same as Iranian, we call it mohalla. India, they pronounce it mohalla. So every mohalla, they have own men band running the procession, expressing themselves as a, dominant community in the city, and obviously was involved with lots of Hindus, especially lower caste Hindu in this kind of procession. And it was involved with drinking, dancing, all kind of things. So it was a pure festival, a carnival. And I showed this picture because, as you can see, the tiger man here, because in India, in Middle East, and especially in Iran, we often basically symbolize Imam Ali as a lion, but in India they use tiger. That's why you see tiger here, not lion. And often they say babar in India. So that was the first segment, I would say. The second part, which was the major part, called Tabut procession, which was on the day of Ashura. And that was the biggest even in Mumbai. Not just basically, that was the absolute biggest festival. And actually, Mumbai was known by Muharram procession during 19th century. And that's why I got that picture, for example. This procession was pretty dominant by Sunnis, especially a community called Konkonis. The other segments, there was obviously Khojas, and the Iranians, the Bora community, and later, which I will talk about it a bit later on, the Aga Khan, because Aga Khan arrived. No, that's okay. That's a blank slide. The Aga Khan arrived in almost mid-19th century. He initially been challenged by a part of Khojas that they are not following him. It has a longer story, but make it short. So his authority was challenged. A part of the leader of the Khojas, they make a case against him in the court and say, we are not Shia at all, we are Sunni, like it was a kind of negotiation again. And eventually he was registering the whole Khoja community in the court as a Shia, Imami, Ismaili. And the Ismaili term was actually used for the first time after a long time on that court case. So for that purpose, he emphasized a lot on Muharram to show that his followers are Shia. So because Muharram was a kind of way of emphasizing on the Shia aspect of the community. And because he arrived from Iran, he used a passion play, all kind of thing that was used in Iran, in his residence, where lots of actually British and other community, foreigners just basically visiting the place. So this, I would say that's generally the landscape of Muharram. The first, I would call it regulation that the authority announced was in 1871, and it was entering the procession to the fort. So Mumbai, basically, it is known as a 7-island, but mainly the city itself was 2 parts. What we call it the fort, which was a walled city administration part, and the old part that we call it native town. So I think it was 1862, the wall was removed, So the administration part of the city was open, so they tried to control the procession and Tuli procession especially to not entering to the old part, the fort. And I have to mention like lots of things that I'm telling you now like a story, they're coming from like 2,000 to 3,000 documents. Technically, I calculate Muharram for 2 centuries. I went to the British Library and asked for the Times of India. And I started reviewing everything because there was no digital version. And I read everything to see what I can find. So every, I don't know how many like police reporter review. And so I went through lots of detail to see what's happening there. So what I'm telling you quickly is based on lots of police report and the governmental report. So that's the old part. So the fort, as you can see, is a walled city. And that's the old part. We'll call it native town. And I want to show you something. Possibly you not usually look at the map carefully. But like when I got that map, I went through the road by road, one by one. I checked every single information that I could find. I'm gonna just surprise you a little bit. The city was Hindu city, right? The black dot are mosques. And the blue one is church, and the magentas are a temple. So you can see how the city was dominated by mosque, but you shouldn't be confused. Lots of them, they are little room or little building, but shows every single of them shows one community. It shows how much Muslim dominate the city, even in terms of the building, This part, known as Dongri these days, that's the heart of Shia community and still is the heart. For those who knows Bombay, here is the Bora Mohalla. There's a seal called Tank, and then the Mughal Masjid is here. So basically this part of the city is the heart of Shia community in Mumbai now. So like during 70s and 80s, gradually there is a temptation by colonial authority to control and regulate Muharram because the city grown fast and the procession became huge. So they tried to control and regulate it. However, because of the Queen Victoria basically policy, they are not supposed to involve and intervene in the religious matters. So in the name of keeping city peaceful and all kind of policing regularity, they start regulating, licensing the procession. So if you want to run the procession, you have to have a license, pay for it. Where is that? All kind of. That was good for me because I had all kind of report. I can get all of the detail, how many like Tabut license was issued this year and that year. So I'm not going to go obviously through them, but that was a huge amount of information through these kind of police reports. The other thing that I was able to basically find was where exactly was the procession route. Was an easy task because like I review hundreds of reports, checking the name of road, but the road names are being changed all the time. So I have to go through different maps because the maps also, they have different names. But eventually after, I don't know, long time, I've been able to trace where exactly was the procession. Although we have few document and report that they mentioned that sometimes the procession was end to the back bay, here called back bay Mumbai. But most of the document that we have, the procession was end up here. That's a Jama Masjid and that's a famous market in Mumbai. And so generally the procession and the ritual was more or less peaceful, although the police, they tried to exaggerate the violence and tension, but luckily enough, we have enough report to show these, I would say, police discourse being exaggerated. For example, I found a really interesting piece of short article, 1982, I guess was. And the guy was mentioning the number of casualties in Muharram was less than Mayor of London parade in London. So like it shows them, obviously they was exaggerated. By the way, gradually, because of, as I said, lots of people coming in Mumbai, negotiation, the tension was rise between Sunni and Shia and Hindu as well. But the main thing that happened was, that was the bloodiest riot in Bombay in 19th century. 1893, the rise of Hindu nationalism, there was a tension during Muharram and there was a huge riot. What was happened, Tilak, that possibly, for those who knows the Indian history, he was a Hindu nationalist, was totally different from Gandhi. He actually admired violence as a way of, imposing power. So what he did, that was a kind of very creative and clever way. Hindu didn't have any public event. So they couldn't dominate the city, basically. So they've been involved only in Muharram, and that was a lower caste community. What was happened, Tilak actually reinvented the festival called Ganpati that we know it today. That now is the biggest festival in Mumbai and in India. You can see like the scale. What was happened, he tried to use the idea of Muharram to invent a new ritual for Hindus. But funnily enough, because the Muharram itself was influenced by Hindu basically culture, it was easy for him to just reinvent the Ganpati. The Ganpati was kind of elite and upper caste ritual, a family ritual, wasn't about community, and they bring the Ganesh, the elephant deity, to the riverside individually during 10 days. So it's interesting, again, we have 10 days here. So what he tried, he invented the whole Ganpati totally based on Muharram. Every committee has own band running the procession together, and everybody bring the Ganesh on the 10th day, the last day, to make it huge. So that was the way that the idea for him, even Edward, is that you possibly know, he's a famous police commissioner of Bombay, he's a very interesting guy. He mentioned the reason that he invented Ganpati was to challenge Muslims and colonial authority. And it was really creative, obviously. I had a paper, I will go through that kind of detail. I have a paper to show this historical link later on in recent time became a way of social conciliation in Dharavi, the biggest slum in India. So I would say that's a very interesting twist in history of Muharram. First of all, Hindu, they no longer need Muharram to be in public. And they basically, get out from the Muharram. The other thing is that almost 2 years later, even the authority announced that they no longer give license to Hindu for Muharram. So from now on, Hindus are out. So it became a Muslim ritual. However, again, we have lots of tension between the Sunnis, now a community called Momen, with the Bohras and Iranians, with Khojas, there are lots of tension. I wouldn't say there's a major problem, but it was a kind of something happening, but generally was peaceful, but the tension was raised, basically. That's a kind of typical, again. As I said, it's all about negotiation. No Hindus are out, the other now they're negotiating. We are arriving in 1912. That's a major riot again. I would say it wasn't major, but the colonial authority tried to use it to impose the power. And that's why I says, even the Brits, they've been involved with negotiation because they tried to use Muharram to impose their own power. Because there was a couple of problems before 1912, 1908, and then there was a community conciliation committee. They solved all the problem, but the police commissioner said, no, we don't want to use them again. And then the tension was raised again, and then he blamed the community. So it's really interesting. There are lots of detail. I went through that kind of thing in very detailed, historical detail in a couple of my publications. But 1912 is a key, again, twist time. The Edwarders announced a new regulation for Muharram, and very tough regulation and conditions, almost impossible to follow. Like say, each procession shouldn't be more than 30 people. Well, any committee would be more than this. So lots of campaign against it, nobody being able to, convince them. They imposed the regulation, and practically there was no procession in Mumbai anymore. And then since then, the whole commemoration reduced to the majlises, mainly in Iranian places. And here is the Iranian became important. The reason is, I said important, they've been heavily marginalized. When they arrived in early 19th century, it was like something like, as the oldest report that I had was 1834 or 5, when they start running the horse procession, which is Shabih or, Passion, the street play. And the Konkonis, the Sunni community, make a case against Iranians. Imagine the Sunni community make a case against Shia, and they say these guys just arriving here, they want to, they just change your rituals. And the court, was with them, so the Iranian horse procession was stopped from public. So Iranian being pushed to the kind of their own kind of places. Now they became important, basically community, because now Sunni because Sunni also they've been involved with the joy and all kind of festival, But for Muslim, for the Shia, they've been grief and more. That was a kind of main differences. So from 1912, the ritual became silent, predominantly Iranian places, so it's all about grief. The other twist here, which is important, the change of Aga Khan's policy. For those of you that know about history, it's not relevant to this regulation and tension, but almost at the same time, Aga Khan III, they start reforming creed and ritual of the Ismailis, which is related also to long history. Is again, I went through some detail, and it shows that, well, if Aga Khan not been in Mumbai, possibly that reform won't happen. So it's a kind of, I would say, the production of cosmopolitan context of Mumbai, because lots of Iranian clergy arrive in Mumbai, challenging the authority of Aga Khan III, converting Khojas, that obviously we discussed it before, the actively converting Khojas to Isna Asharis. Huge tension was happened. So now Aga Khan tried to emphasize on Ismaili aspect. So imagine the Aga Khan the first promoting Muharram, Aga Khan the third tried to distinguish what they call Bari Jama'at, or the majority who follow him. And this reform, possibly that was after a case against Aga Khan by his cousin, Haji Bibi. That's a major case against him. And that's a twist. In the court, he changed the whole idea from Sharia to Tariqat. I'm sure you heard of it because you are in this field. You didn't heard of it. Okay, possibly that's interesting for you. So when his Haji Bibi make a case against Aga Khan III, well, said you got all of the heritage from Aga Khan the first. I have the share. If you are following Prophet Muhammad, I have 1/3. But where is my share? Then there was a long discussion in court. I mean, it takes a long time. It wasn't like 1 or 2 years even. But eventually he claimed in the court that I'm the leader of the community and I'm announcing my followers shouldn't follow the Sharia. They have to follow Tariqat, which is me. So you have to follow whatever I said. So that's a very interesting twist in the court. There's two interesting courts, basically. The first court, the cause that Aga Khan the first registering Khoja Ismaili as a Shia Imami, and then now this kind of the new twist. The other thing that he sought after this court was asking his follower to not commemorating Muharram. Again, that was a way to distinguish the Isna Asharis, Nazari, because I'm going to go to the other Ismailis, and and he announced openly that as long as you have a living Imam, there's no reason to commemorate the dead Imam. As simple as that. That's his statement. Very interesting. So as you can see, here is a very interesting point. Everything now is just quickly changed. Now it's all about Shia. The Khoja Isna Ashari, so the Khoja Nazari is out. Very silent. And although I went through lots of documents in archives, all kind of things, but sometimes an object in cemetery is document. That's the stone graveyard of one of the Kashani family who was actively converting Khojas to Isna Asharis. His grandfather and father been buried in Qom, but he's in Mazgan, which is in north of old city of Mumbai, where the Muharram procession now is ended. So I was walking around in the cemetery, and I found that one. I was fascinated to read that text. And I said, well, that's the part of history here. It's a document to tell who was converting the Khojas and all kind of things. So the Iranian, obviously, they investing a lot on the religious places. The oldest Shia place in Mumbai is the Mughal Masjid, which is the Iranian mosque. And they became very important community on that time, this kind of silent time, I would call it. And it's interesting again to mention why they've been called Mughal. That's again what I said, like when they arrive in Mumbai, you no longer have the old identity. You have to invent a new identity because you're no longer the old guy. And I went through lots of documents, never find any convincing reason why they've been called Mughal. Later, through lots of interviews with my interviewees and informants, I realized what was happening. So first of all, we have one of the oldest community in India called Parsis, or Iranian, Zoroastrian Iranian, very elite. They've been in Gujarat, later being moved to Mumbai, became the capital of them. Late 19th century, another Zoroastrian community moved to India, immigrant, because of the problem in Iran. When they arrive in Mumbai, but they are peasants. They are from villages around Kerman and Yazd. They are not elite. Arriving in Mumbai, obviously people, they distinguish them, these elite, very wealthy family from these kind of new arriving guys that they have nothing, you know. The other things, the old Parsis, they no longer speak Persian, they speak Gujarati, so they're totally different. What they did in Mumbai, they called them Parsi, the Zoroastrian, the new Zoroastrian being called Irani. If you go to Mumbai now, lots of people their family name is Irani, that's from this community. With the same time, from same area, from center of Iran, from Yazd and Kerman, Shia Isna Ashari moved to Mumbai. And the Indians say, hey, come on, there's another Iranian community coming. What they do, you know? So because they speak Farsi and they are Shia, and because of the Mughal Empire, and the Shia in Mughal Empire been aristocrat, and they speak Farsi, they invent the name for them. They call them Mughal. As simple as that. So it shows how cosmopolitan context define the identity. And funnily enough, I was talking with one of these community, and he mentioned, you know, Reza, we have a Husayn in Tehran from these second, third, fourth generation who back to Iran. They are obviously Indian, Iranian, and they said, well, this Husayn in Tehran is called Hindi Husayn. And he said, we are Mughal here and Hindi in Tehran. So like it shows how identity is a relative concept. And so what they did, Iranians, is still today, most of Shia places in Mumbai, they are founded by Iranians. What they did, they have one Imambara here, one of the oldest Imambara, Shushtari Imambara here, the Mughal Masjid, another Imambara, Zain al-Abidin Imambara here, and then they called Darbar Hosseini here, which is by Yazdi's community. The rest, they all founded by the Shirazi merchants and traders, but later on the Yazdis arrived, they've not been wealthy that much, so their community make a building, but the rest they all built with one kind of trader. So what the Iranian did, there was a kind of trick, kind of tricking Brits. They start have majlises in all these places. When the first majlis finish, they all together moving to the second place. They call it silent procession, because they say, well, they've been the Brits, they kind of tolerate us, but we move all together gradually. That became a normal procession later on. I'm talking about like 1940s. And then obviously after the independence, lots of Shia moved to Mumbai. Then suddenly the Shia community became pretty big and they gained confidence. And here now we have Hojaz again and lots of Shia from UP. So what's happened? They start building or inventing new processions based on Iranian processions and all around Iranian places. Because the Shia, they almost have no places apart from well, I would say, like, I will show you the other buildings. And so what's happened, the major procession was invented during 60s, gradually from the Dongri area, which is the heart of Shia, to the cemetery here, which is a Shia cemetery by Iran. That's an Iranian cemetery, but not now used by all Shias. So they kind of inventing, I would say, the new procession. But the key point here is, that's the interesting point. For me is important. Now the ritual, the procession is totally Shia. It's not about the 19th century procession ending to the seafront. It's ending to the cemetery. And there has no Sunni or any other aspect. So that's my point is, all of this negotiation make Mumbai procession totally unique in India. So, because if you go to any other city in India, it still is dominated by Sunnis. But here in Bombay, it's totally Shia procession. And then later on, they basically establish a new other procession, which is a start from a little place. Again, it has a longer story, but it's just a kind of a room. But it was an excuse to get together. I will show you a picture later. And then joining to that Imambara, they go through the rest of Iranian procession. But interestingly, Iranian, they run their own procession within this short procession because they want to distinguish themselves still from the rest. So although my point is like, although everybody running the ritual together, it doesn't mean they are one community. And actually rituals often create a strong bond and boundary against other. So although ritual is about the community, but it's distinguishing from other, and that's why it's still different. So Iranian, although they dominate the Shia community because of this kind of contribution, but still they want to have own kind of procession. So they are joining the rest of procession, but not as a community, as an individual. They claim that's our procession. We are not going to go to the rest. But obviously they go to the procession, but individually, as I said. So today, city is huge, 22 million, and Dongri is no longer the most kind of important place in terms of population of Shia, but it's still the heart of the Shia community because of all of the old religious places are there. Possibly the most population are here, called Govandi, very poor area, it's kind of slums. Bandra, which was an important place, which I couldn't go through the detail of that kind of history, and the Jogeshwari and Mumbai outside of Mumbai, India. It's a huge Shia community. Interestingly, all of these places, they have own ritual, a small procession, but still everybody say the heart of the Muharram is in Dongri. And there is no ritual in Ashura Day anywhere else. They call it Makhsusi Dongri, they call it like that. And so everybody coming to the Dongri area, and that's why it's heart of Shia. You can see all of these places are the Shia places, the Khoja Jama Masjid, the Mughal Masjid Iranian, and that's the Bora places, the very important place. I will show you some picture, and then other Imambara. So the whole area during Muharram is totally changed. So if you get there, you see it's just the ritual arena. That's the Govandi area, and looks like that. So when the Muharram start, so it's basically all bazaar and market, very vivid and interesting places. And that's Muhammad Ali Road if you know Mumbai. So when Muharram starts, you can see lots of bits and pieces, people making things, initiating the Muharram is the start, lots of bits and pieces as a kind of symbolic thing referring to Muharram, to tragedy of Ashura. The flag, so basically the city totally changed. That's the front of Mughal Masjid, Iranian mosque. All of the shops are changed during Muharram. So they are selling things that are related to Muharram. So they're selling zanjir. These vendors, they are sharpening blades and all kind of things. The old road, they are cooking place. And even rooftops change. So like you're going to be overwhelmed with all of things that happen there. And that's the gathering before Ashura night procession. It's a little room that the Iranian community changed it to what they call it hayat, and then they make it excuse people coming here. So people from all over Dongri coming here, have a evening prayer, and then running the procession back to the Dongri. And it's huge. It's a huge event. And you possibly can't believe it. Such a crowd is exclusive ritual. That's the Bora community Muharram events. The Boras, if you know, they are Ismaili, but they are not following Agha Khan. Technically we call them Musta'ali. The Agha Khanis, they call them Nazari. No, Dawoodi is, again, a part of the Boras. That's a different things. Because within the boroughs, they all again, they divided. One part is called the Dawoodi boroughs, and so it's, if I want to go through that kind of detail. So basically, Mumbai, when you arrive, if you want to walk on, they're definitely going to be confused. How many different Shia are there? And even people from Mumbai, they are confused. When I was talking to some local guy, and he said, like, he tried to, explain to me who's who here. And then he said, Khoja Bora. And then later on, because I was recording, later on I listened, what do you mean by Khoja Bora? Like, what else? Like, so it's very confusing, I would say. So you have to be there for a long time to understand who is who here. Like, for example, the Khojas, the Isna Ashari are much more close to Iranian, but then the Boras are very keen to go to Iranian places. So it's very interesting. But the Boras, that's the myth, because the Bora was also divided, there was a reform, and actually this dress is invented during 60s or 70s reform, that the Da'i asked them to wear the colorful and light dress by ladies and pure white, you can see at the end. Sometimes, if I want to just summarize my research fieldwork, I'll show this picture. Because to be on that place, on that day, I have to networking for 1 year. Because the whole event for the Boras is extremely exclusive. Every single person here, they will register by email. So the whole area been gated, because for the Boras, it's totally exclusive. First of all, let me put it in this way. I was walking around, I tried to networking with people in Bendi Bazaar, in that road. And I stopped some guys, obviously Bora, and say, can I ask you something? And I say, yes. And they say, what are you going to ask? I say, I want to ask you about Muharram. I said, no, I can't answer you. And somebody who knows Indians, that's very unusual. The Indians say no, it's very unusual. Because very exclusive community, everything is exclusive. So there's no way to get in the ceremony, the Muharram. And I was networking for 1 year, and eventually only because I was invited with very elite member of in the community, I was able to go there. They put me in the VIP place, all kind of thing. But what I said, like, it still is a Shia ritual, but it doesn't mean it's one ritual. It's still, again, each community has own kind of things, And so that's a Da'i passing by, and that's the end of the Majlis. I'm going to just mention that's the end of discussion. I'm going to mention that there are still very few segments of Sunnis. They don't have rituals as such, but they have a gathering to commemorating Muharram. But very minor, very few places. But one of very interesting and new phenomena in Mumbai is basically rising of Wahhabis in Dongri. If you look at this image carefully, you can see, unfortunately, the resolution of the data projection is not good. You can see here, say like Sal Nu, like Happy New Year, because of Muharram, obviously the beginning of year. So the whole idea, first of all, they are arriving back from Saudi. Most of them are kind of labor, working class, very poor, living in the poor area. Because although, as I said, they still Dongri is a Shia, heart of Shia community, but most of them, because of wealthy, they are not living here. They are moving out. So what they did, they try, because they arrived, even they are new community within Muslims, within Sunnis. They try to create an identity for themselves. What they do, they actually try to challenge Muharram. So that's why I call it counter-ritual. So they use Muharram to claim their own identity by challenging Muharram ritual. So it's very interesting. That's why I said that's an urban ritual. And so they claim this spot. They have a mosque here. I would say relatively, not too little, but this is a kind of medium-sized mosque. But they purposely claim that public space. So the reason is, oh, I missed that map. I will go back to the map. Okay. The procession, as I said, they're coming. So here is very intensive area. So they claim this little part of space here. So during the ritual of Muharram, the procession, these people are just going and back and forth. It's a very busy area. So they claim that heart of the area because say we are living here, we have a right to have access to that place. So they try to build their own identity within the city. Yeah, that's all. And sorry it was long, possibly was too detailed, but I tried to be kind of brief. But if you are interested to, possibly you can't read them. That's a series of my papers on Muharram in Bombay, and some of them are extremely theoretical about notion of a space. For example, the first one is extremely theoretical discussion about notion of a space through the flagellation, for example, which is going to be published, I think, possibly this month. And so each of them, they are very focused on certain area. The one of them, which is about Iranian community and the way that they establish very detailed historical, which is in chapter 2 of this book, recently published. And so if you want, you possibly can easily find this list of papers. Thanks a lot. Sorry for too long.